Now let's take a look at Chapter 1, page 31, Example E, the final harmonization example from this chapter. Again, we need to determine the key signature. This time, we are in the key of C major, as indicated by the lack of sharps and flats in the key signature. Still, I will write my key, C major. Next, we need to determine the notes in the 1 chord of C major and the 5 chord. In this case, the 1 chord is C, E, G. The 5 chord is G, B, D. Now we need to determine the common tones. In the first measure, we have G's and an A. That could actually work with either. But in this case, we're going to start with 1, and 1 chord does make sense to start with anyhow, and it is what it's given here. It sort of grounds the music by starting on the 1 chord. Not always necessary, but it's very typical. Second measure, we have a G. G is common in both chords. E is common in the 1 chord. F is not common in either chord. So we'll stay with the 1 chord since we have 2 common tones. Next measure, we have G, 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 A, G. Here you have some options. Again, G is common in both chords. We could do one of 2 options, and I'll show you. We could stay with a 1 chord. The music ends on a G, and we could end on a 5 chord, creating what is known as a half cadence. The other option is the opposite. We could start on the 5 chord and come back to a 1 chord. Okay? Both are valid. So these are both valid options. You can do either. On the next system, we'll start the same way. 1 chord, 1 chord, and in this case, to create a sense of finality, 5 chord, returning to the 1 chord. Next, we'll notate the notes. Okay, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and do the interesting variation. So I'll do G and D, returning to C and G. You can also do the opposite, and then going to the 5 chord. Next line, 1 chord, C and G. And 5 chord, G and D. Back to the 1 chord, C and G. All right, I'll play it both ways for you so you can hear the difference. But first, let's determine the fingering for the right hand. Again, we look at parameters. The highest note is an A and the lowest note is an E. So in this case, I'm going to put my thumb on the note E, which means the rest of the fingers will follow thusly. So interestingly enough, we're going to start on 3rd finger here, even though it is in the key of C major. Okay. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and write the lead sheet symbols. C major chord, C major chord. Here, depending what you choose, I'll do a C major followed by a G major, just for a little variety. Here's the lead sheet symbols. And now let's play the right hand here. I'm going to start with 3rd finger. 1 and 2 and 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 1 Notice how I'm counting while I play to make sure that I'm maintaining a steady tempo. Now let's try it hands together. Again, you may be using slightly different chords than me. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1, 2. This concludes the harmonization section for Chapter 1. I'll see you in the next video when we begin to talk about transposition.